Look around you for a second, not in a poetic way, in a real way. Look at your phone, look at the door, look at the calendar, look at the same problems you've been carrying from year to year like they're part of your personality. Now let this land without decoration. No one is coming to save you. Not a mentor, not a perfect partner, not a lucky break that suddenly fixes your habits, not a new job that magically makes you disciplined. Not a friend who finally says the exact sentence that heals you. Not a future version of you who wakes up one day and feels ready. If your life changes, it will be because you changed it. And I know that line can sound harsh, but it's only harsh if you still need the fantasy. Because there's a place a lot of people live in, and it's not a city, it's not a house, it's not even a real location. It's a mental room, a waiting room. And in that waiting room, you keep telling yourself the same stories. After this stressful period, after I get past this, after someone helps, and you don't realize it, but you're not waiting for timing. You're waiting for rescue. You're waiting for life to become easy enough that you can finally start acting like the person you want to be. Here's what maturity is. Psychological maturity isn't confidence, it isn't intelligence, it isn't even toughness. It's the moment you stop outsourcing your life, the moment you stop treating your problems like they belong to someone else to solve. The moment you stop hoping the universe will notice your suffering and reward you for it like a movie ending. Reality doesn't work like that. Pain doesn't earn prizes. Time doesn't feel sorry for you. And the world doesn't care how unfair it's been, because unfairness doesn't come with instructions. This isn't me trying to be dramatic. This is me trying to give you the most freeing sentence you can ever accept. Because the second you accept that no one is coming, you stop waiting. And when you stop waiting, you become dangerous in the best way. You become the kind of person who doesn't need perfect conditions. You become the kind of person who can move through discomfort without turning it into a tragedy. You become the kind of person who doesn't need someone to hold their hand just to do what they already know they should do. So I want you to hear this like a line in the sand, not a motivational quote, a decision. Your health is your responsibility. Your money is your responsibility. Your mindset is your responsibility. Your habits are your responsibility. Your emotional control is your responsibility. Even if you didn't create all your problems, you are the one living with them. That means you're also the only one who can end them. And if that makes you feel a little angry, good, because anger is energy. But don't waste it on blaming the past. Use it to break the spell. Use it to stand up out of the waiting room. Use it to stop living like a child who expects someone to show up with answers and start living like an adult who builds answers with action. And now we're going to go straight into the first truth you need to swallow, because this entire transformation begins with one brutal realization. You were fed a comforting lie. You were fed a comforting lie, and the reason it's so dangerous is because it doesn't sound like a lie. It sounds like hope. It sounds like optimism. It sounds like things will work out. But for a lot of people, that phrase isn't a mindset. It's a sedative. It's the story they tell themselves to stay asleep while life keeps moving. From the time you were young, you were surrounded by a specific kind of narrative. The weak get rescued. The broken get rewarded, the misunderstood get discovered, the suffering gets compensated. Somewhere, somehow, a moment arrives where the universe finally says, "You've been through enough. Here, let me fix it." And even if you don't consciously believe that, it gets into you anyway. It trains your nervous system to wait for a turning point that isn't earned. It teaches you that your job is to endure and someone else's job is to deliver the happy ending. And then you grow up and the story doesn't stop. It just changes costumes. Now it's not a prince or a superhero. It's a boss who finally recognizes you. It's a relationship that finally heals you. It's a sudden glow-up that fixes your confidence. It's a viral moment that gives you status. It's a new routine that magically makes you disciplined. It's next Monday. It's next month. It's when things calm down. It's that imaginary version of life where the conditions are perfect and you finally become the person you keep promising you'll be. But here's the problem. That story creates a hidden contract in your mind. A contract you never signed, but you still live by. The contract says, if I suffer long enough, I deserve a reward. If I've been through a lot, life should be easier for me. If I'm a good person, things should eventually fall into place. If I keep waiting, something will arrive that makes action feel natural. Reality didn't sign that contract. Reality doesn't look at your pain and calculate what you're owed. Reality doesn't care how unfair your childhood was. Reality doesn't care that you tried before and failed. Reality is not cruel, because cruelty implies intention. Reality is indifferent. And that's what makes it so clean and so brutal. Indifference means there's no villain to defeat and no hero to arrive. There's just you and what you do next. This is why some people stay stuck for years while still feeling like they're trying, because they confuse emotional struggle with progress. They confuse thinking about change with change. They confuse talking about healing with healing. They confuse surviving with building. And every time they feel overwhelmed, they return to the same comfort. One day, something will happen. As if life is a slot machine and they just need to keep pulling the lever. Let me make this painfully practical. If you're waiting to feel motivated before you work, you're waiting to be saved. If you're waiting for confidence before you put yourself out there, you're waiting to be saved. If you're waiting for someone to validate you before you take yourself seriously, you're waiting to be saved. If you're waiting for the right time to start fixing your body, your finances, your mind, then you're not planning. You're postponing. You're delaying responsibility with polite words. The mature truth is simpler. Nothing changes because you deserve it. Things change because you do the uncomfortable work consistently enough that reality has no choice but to respond. Not because it loves you, not because it noticed you, but because actions have consequences and discipline has a compounding effect that doesn't care who you are. And I know there's a part of you that wants to argue, a part that wants to say, but you don't understand what I went through. Maybe I don't, and maybe nobody fully does. But here's what I do understand. Whatever happened to you, you're the one living in your body. You're the one waking up in your mornings. You're the one carrying your thoughts. And if you keep holding on to the lie that someone or something is supposed to make this easier, you will lose years, quietly, without a dramatic collapse, just a slow decay where you get older and you get used to disappointment and you start calling it reality. So we're going to break that lie right now. Not with anger, with clarity. You are not owed a rescue. You are not owed a turning point. You are not owed understanding. You are not owed motivation. The only thing you're guaranteed is time passing. That's it. Everything else, strength, peace, discipline, confidence, money, skill, self-respect, has to be built like a structure, brick by brick, with your hands. And once you accept that, you stop waiting for a miracle and you start becoming one. Not in a magical sense, in the only sense that matters. You finally take control. And now that the lie is exposed, we have to confront the next truth. Because the reason people cling to the rescue fantasy is not ignorance. It's that victimhood has benefits. Victimhood has benefits. That's the part nobody wants to admit because it sounds ugly and it threatens the identity you've been using to survive. But if we're being serious, if this episode is really about growth and not comfort, then we have to say it clean. The victim role pays you, not in money, in relief, in excuses, in a story that protects you from the most terrifying responsibility on earth, the responsibility of being the author of your own life. When you're the victim, you don't have to be the one who failed. You don't have to be the one who didn't follow through. You don't have to be the one who kept choosing the easy thing. You can point outward. You can name the villains. You can list the reasons. You can collect evidence. And all of it might be true. That's the trap. Victimhood doesn't require you to lie. It only requires you to stop at the part of the truth that keeps you powerless. Because here's what victimhood really is: a way to avoid risk, a way to avoid judgment, a way to avoid the shame of trying and not being immediately great, a way to avoid changing your habits, because changing habits means admitting your old habits were killing you, and that admission hurts. It's easier to call your situation unfair than to call your behavior inconsistent. It's easier to say, "They ruined me," than to say, "I've been avoiding the work." It's easier to say, "I'm broken," than to say, "I've been comfortable." And I'm not saying you weren't hurt. I'm not saying you weren't betrayed, or neglected, or humiliated, or dragged through things you didn't deserve. I'm saying something colder. Pain is not permission to stay small. Pain explains you. It does not excuse you. If anything, pain is the reason you can't afford to live asleep anymore. The victim role also gives you something else: attention. When you're the victim, people gather around your story. They validate it. They comfort you. They say, "You didn't deserve that." And again, maybe you didn't. But what happens next? You start becoming loyal to the identity that gets you comfort. You become addicted to being understood. You start repeating the story, refining the story, polishing the story, telling it again with better words, because the story has become a home. A dark home, but a home. And the cost of that home is brutal. You don't move. Because movement would threaten the story. If you suddenly became disciplined, the story would lose its power. If you suddenly got healthy, the story would have to change. If you suddenly built a strong life, you'd have to confront the painful possibility that you could have started earlier. And for a lot of people, that's unbearable. So they stay in victimhood because it keeps the past from being wasted. It gives the suffering a purpose. It lets them say, "At least my pain means something." But pain doesn't need to mean something to be real. It doesn't need to be poetic. It doesn't need to be justified. It needs to be processed and then transformed into action. That's maturity. Not pretending it didn't happen. Not denying it, but refusing to let it become your whole personality. Now listen closely, because this is where growth becomes violent in a good way, violent against illusion. The victim mindset always asks the same question: who did this to me? And that question can be useful for 1 minute, maybe for understanding, maybe for closure. But if you keep living there, it becomes a prison. Because the only question that builds a future is this: what am I going to do about it now? That's the shift. The victim asks for a savior. The mature person builds a system. The victim waits for rescue. The mature person takes ownership. The victim collects blame like it's evidence in a courtroom. The mature person collects habits like weapons. And yes, blame feels good. That's why people use it. Blame is emotional anesthesia. It numbs the pain of responsibility. It lets you feel righteous while staying stuck. It's a drug, and like any drug, it works until it ruins you. So here's the test I want you to sit with, honestly, without performing. If your life stayed exactly the same for the next year, who would you blame? Who is your favorite target? Who is the easiest person, the easiest system, the easiest excuse to point at so you don't have to point at yourself? Because the moment you see that clearly, you'll also see what victimhood really is: a strategy, and it's a losing strategy. Now we go to the next chapter, and it's going to sting because it removes the last layer of denial. If victimhood has benefits, it means something else is true too. And it's the brutal mirror most people avoid. You've been choosing more than you admit. You've been choosing more than you admit. And I need you to hear that in the right tone, because this isn't an insult. It's a door. It's the first honest doorway back to power. But it will sting, because it removes the most convenient illusion a human being can carry. The illusion that your life is mostly happening to you. Yes, things happen to you. Yes, some of it was unfair. Yes, some of it was out of your control. But if you look closely, really closely, most of your current life isn't built from one big tragedy. It's built from 1,000 small votes, quiet votes, daily votes, votes you cast with your habits, with your attention, with what you tolerate, with what you delay, with what you avoid, with what you feed and what you starve. Nobody wakes up one day and accidentally becomes undisciplined. You practice undisciplined. Nobody accidentally becomes anxious all the time. You practice avoidance and call it safety. Nobody accidentally ends up broke, out of shape, low confidence, stuck in the same patterns. It's not an accident. It's a pattern that got repeated until it felt like identity. This is the brutal mirror. You've been choosing comfort more than growth. Not because you're weak, because comfort is immediate and growth is delayed, and most people are trained to worship what's immediate. You've been choosing distraction over discomfort. You've been choosing the easy hit over the hard climb. You've been choosing later over now. And later is the most expensive word in the human language, because later steals years while sounding harmless. Think about how this shows up in real life. You say you want a different body, but you choose the same food, the same skipping, the same tomorrow. You say you want more money, but you choose scrolling over skill building, impulse buying over investing, complaining over learning. You say you want peace, but you choose arguments, gossip, chaos, and relationships that drain you because loneliness scares you more than stress. You say you want confidence, but you choose hiding, postponing, waiting until you feel ready, when confidence only comes after you do the thing while you're not ready. And here's the part most people hate. These choices don't feel like choices. They feel like moods. They feel like I'm tired. They feel like I had a long day. They feel like it's been rough lately. They feel like I deserve a break. And you do deserve rest. But what most people call rest is actually escape. And escape is a vote. It's a vote for the life you already have. This chapter is about stripping away that soft language, because soft language creates soft lives. If you keep saying, I'm trying, but your actions don't change, then trying is just the word you use to avoid accountability. If you keep saying, I don't have time, but you have hours for entertainment, then it's not a time problem. It's a priority problem. If you keep saying, I'm not motivated, what you really mean is, I'm not willing to feel discomfort. And that's not motivation, that's maturity. Now I want you to see something important, because this is where people get it wrong. They hear a message like this, and they fall into self-hatred. They start attacking themselves. They start saying, I'm pathetic. I ruined everything. That's not strength. That's just another excuse in disguise, because self-hatred can become a drama that replaces action. You don't need to hate yourself. You need to stop lying to yourself. The power is in clarity. The power is in admitting, I've been choosing this. Because the moment you admit you've been choosing it, you also admit you can choose differently. That's the whole point. If your life is only happening to you, you're trapped. But if your life is partially shaped by your choices, then you're not trapped. You're just undisciplined, distracted, afraid, or untrained. And those are fixable. Those are trainable. Those are solvable. So here's a question that cuts through the fog, and I want you to answer it without performing for anyone. Not for me, for you. What is the one area of your life where you keep saying, it's not my fault? But deep down, you know you've been participating through avoidance, participating through tolerance, participating through excuses, participating through inconsistency. Where have you been voting against your own future? Because that answer isn't meant to shame you. It's meant to locate the steering wheel. It's meant to put your hands back on it. And now we move into the next chapter, because once you see that you've been choosing more than you admit, there's only one move left if you want to grow. One move that ends the negotiation, ends the excuses, ends the waiting room mindset. Radical ownership. No more bargaining. Radical ownership. No more bargaining. This is where the childish part of the mind panics because it wants a loophole. It wants a special case. It wants an exception that lets you stay comfortable while still calling yourself serious. Radical ownership kills that. It doesn't care how you feel about the truth. It only cares what the truth produces. Here's the rule, said Clean. Even when it's not your fault, it is your problem. And I'm not saying that to be cruel. I'm saying it because it's the only stance that gives you power. If you keep waiting for the people who cause damage to also fix the damage, you will wait forever. If you keep demanding fairness from life before you act, you will never act. If you keep looking for a perfect explanation before you take responsibility, you'll spend your whole life collecting reasons and calling it growth. Radical ownership is the decision to stop arguing with reality. You stop negotiating with should have. You stop making your future dependent on your past being different. You stop making your progress dependent on someone apologizing. You stop acting like closure is required before you can build, because closure is not a gift somebody gives you. Closure is a door you close yourself. Let's bring it down to the ground. Radical ownership sounds big, but it shows up in small moments. You feel anxious. The old you says, someone needs to calm me down. The mature you says, this is my nervous system. I'm going to regulate it. Right now. You feel broke. The old you says, the system is rigged. Maybe it is. The mature you says, fine, what skill increases my income? What habit stops my bleeding? You feel disrespected. The old you says, they need to change. The mature you says, then I change what I allow. I change what I accept. I change what I participate in. You feel stuck. The old you says, I need motivation. The mature you says, motivation is optional, movement is not. Radical ownership doesn't deny reality, it uses reality. It's not, everything is my fault. It's everything is my responsibility. There's a difference. Fault is about blame. Responsibility is about control. Fault keeps you stuck in the past. Responsibility gives you a future. And this is where your whole life starts changing, not in theory, but in practice, because the moment you take responsibility, you stop waiting for permission. You stop waiting for perfect conditions. You stop waiting for someone to understand you. You stop needing the world to be gentle with you before you become strong. But here's what most people don't understand. Radical ownership is not a motivational mood. It's a standard, a law, a lifestyle, because the world will test it immediately. The moment you decide, I'm responsible, life will throw chaos at you. Bad days, stress, setbacks, disrespect, uncertainty, and you'll feel the old reflex come back. Blame, avoidance, complaining. Why me? Radical ownership is what you do in that moment, not what you say on a good day. So I want to give you a hard mental shift that makes this real. Stop asking, whose fault is this? Start asking, what's the next action? Because fault is a conversation. Next action is a weapon. Fault keeps you talking. Action keeps you building. And there's another reason people avoid radical ownership. Because once you own it, you lose your excuses. If you say, my life is my responsibility, you can't hide behind your past anymore. You can't hide behind your mood. You can't hide behind your environment. You can't hide behind your personality type. You can't hide behind unfairness. You can still acknowledge those things, but you can't worship them. This is why radical ownership feels like pressure. Because it is. It's the pressure of adulthood. It's the pressure of saying, I don't get to be a passenger in my own life. And yes, that's heavy, but it's also clean. It's simple. It's honest. Now, here's the reward. Because there is one, and it's immediate. When you take ownership, you stop being confused. Confusion often comes from trying to control what you don't control. Ownership cuts through that. It tells you exactly where your energy goes, into what you can actually change. Your habits, your decisions, your standards, your effort, your response, your skill, your discipline. And once you do that, you stop needing a savior. Because you become one in the only way that matters. You start rescuing yourself through behavior. Now we have to go to the next chapter because radical ownership is a decision, but it requires a specific skill set to hold. If you don't build that skill set, you'll keep collapsing back into waiting, back into seeking comfort from outside. That skill set is psychological reparenting, becoming the adult in your own life. If you don't reparent yourself, you will keep looking for a parent. And I don't mean that as an insult. I mean it as a diagnosis of how a lot of adults quietly live. They're grown on paper, but emotionally they're still outsourcing basic stability. They're still searching for someone to regulate them, someone to reassure them, someone to give them permission, someone to push them, someone to tell them what to do next. And when that person doesn't appear, they feel abandoned and they shut down, and they call it life. This is what psychological maturity actually demands. You become the adult in your own life, not in a motivational way, in a practical way, because nobody is going to consistently calm your nervous system, protect your boundaries, structure your days, manage your impulses, and keep your standards high. That's not coming. That job is yours. Reparenting is two skills, and if you don't build them, you will stay zavissimi on the world, self-soothing and self-command. Self-soothing is the part most people misunderstand. They think self-soothing means being nice to yourself, taking it easy, giving yourself a break. Sometimes, sure, but real self-soothing is regulation. It's the ability to calm the panic without running to distractions. It's the ability to feel discomfort without immediately escaping. It's the ability to sit inside an emotional storm and not do something stupid just to get relief. Because the childish version of you does one thing when it feels bad. It reaches. It reaches for the phone. It reaches for food. It reaches for a person. It reaches for attention. It reaches for anything that makes the feeling disappear. And the problem is that reflex doesn't solve pain. It trains pain. It teaches your brain anytime you feel uncomfortable, you must escape. And then your whole life becomes built around avoidance. Reparenting says no. When you feel bad, you don't abandon yourself. You stay, you breathe, you slow down, you take the edge off the emotion without destroying your future. And then comes the second skill, self-command. This is where a lot of people collapse because they want comfort without leadership, but you can't build a strong life with a weak inner authority. Someone has to be in charge. If your mood is in charge, you're finished. If your impulses are in charge, you're finished. If your cravings are in charge, you're finished. Self-command means you become capable of giving yourself a direct order and following it. Not 5 orders. 1. Clear, simple, non-negotiable. You don't say, I need to change my life. That's vague and dramatic. You say, I'm going to do this next, and you do it, even if your mind complains the whole time. That's adulthood. You stop negotiating with yourself like you're a committee. You become a leader. Now, here's the hard truth. A lot of people are addicted to being emotionally rescued. They want someone to say, it's okay, you don't have to do it today. And sometimes that's valid, but most of the time, that voice is not mercy. It's weakness wearing a warm tone. Reparenting gives you a stronger mercy, the kind that says, I know this is hard, I know you're tired, I know you're scared, but we're still doing the next right thing. Not everything, just the next right thing. Because that's how you build trust with yourself. You don't build self-esteem by repeating affirmations. You build it by becoming reliable. You build it by proving again and again that you won't abandon yourself when life gets uncomfortable. And once you do that, something changes deep inside you. You stop craving external approval the same way. You stop clinging to people to stabilize you. You stop chasing reassurance like oxygen, because you become your own source of stability. This chapter matters because it's the bridge. Radical ownership says, "It's on me." Reparenting teaches you how to carry that weight without collapsing. Now the next chapter is going to sharpen it even more, because once you start reparenting yourself, there's one enemy that will still try to take the steering wheel every day: your mood, your feelings, the idea that you should only act when you feel ready. So now we face it directly. Mood is not an authority. Mood is not an authority. That sentence alone can change your entire life, because most people don't realize they've been living under a quiet dictatorship, and the dictator is whatever they feel in the moment. Tired, anxious, unmotivated, offended, overwhelmed, bored, uncertain, and every time that feeling shows up, it gets to decide what happens next, which means your future is being managed by the most unstable system imaginable. Here's the childish formula: I act when I feel like it. And it sounds harmless, it even sounds honest, but it's the fastest way to build a life you don't respect, because feelings are not designed to protect your destiny. They're designed to protect your comfort. They're short-term. They're reactive. They're shaped by sleep, sugar, stress, and whatever someone said to you 5 minutes ago. If you let them lead, you become a passenger in your own life. Psychological maturity is when you flip the formula. You don't ignore your feelings. You just stop obeying them. You listen to them like you'd listen to weather. You take the information, and then you decide anyway. Because think about what waiting to feel ready actually means. It means you're waiting for a version of life where discomfort is gone, and that version does not exist. The real world does not hand out clean days. The real world gives you imperfect mornings, noisy minds, awkward emotions, and responsibilities that don't care what mood you woke up with. So if your rule is, "I'll start when I feel good," you basically just promise to never start. This is why people stay stuck for years while still feeling like they're making sense. They say, "I'm not motivated." What they really mean is, "I don't want to feel discomfort." They say, "I'm overwhelmed." What they really mean is, "I want a guarantee before I move." They say, "I'm tired," and sometimes they truly are. But the deeper problem is this: they've trained themselves to treat tiredness as a veto, not as a condition. A mature person doesn't romanticize discipline, they just understand a law. You do not rise to the level of your intentions, you fall to the level of your standards. And standards are not feelings. Standards are decisions you follow on days that don't feel inspirational. So here's the shift that makes it real. You stop asking, "Do I feel like it?" and you start asking, "What does the person I'm trying to become do next?" Not for 2 hours, not for the whole day. Next. One move, one clean move you can execute even while your mind complains. Because your mind will complain. It will always complain. It's built to conserve energy. It's built to avoid pain. It's built to keep you safe, not to make you great. And if you've been waiting for your mind to become supportive before you act, you've been waiting for a liar to become honest. It won't happen. This is also where people confuse kindness with weakness. They think being mature means being gentle with themselves all the time. No, real maturity is balanced. You give yourself understanding, but you don't give yourself escape. You acknowledge reality, but you don't worship it. You can say, "I'm exhausted," and still take the next step. You can say, "I'm anxious," and still make the call. You can say, "I'm sad," and still keep your promise. That's not cruelty, that's self-respect. And notice how clean this makes your life. When mood stops being the leader, your day becomes predictable, not easy. Predictable. You stop living in chaos. You stop letting emotional waves decide whether you keep your word. And when you keep your word, Even in small ways, a deeper confidence starts forming. Not the fake confidence that comes from hype. The real confidence that comes from reliability. The confidence that whispers, "I don't need to feel ready. I just do what I said." Now here's the part that ties directly back to the title. When no one is coming to save you, you don't get to wait for mood, because mood is basically you asking for a rescue from inside. It's you saying, "I need to feel better first." But life doesn't wait for your emotional permission. So maturity is choosing to move while the feeling is still there. That's the real upgrade. And once you accept that, once you stop treating mood like a boss, you're ready for the next step. And it's going to sound harsh, but it's freedom. You are going to pay a price either way. The only question is when and what kind of pain you prefer. The clean pain you choose or the messy pain you inherit. You're going to pay a price either way. That's not pessimism, that's the law. And a mature person stops arguing with laws. They don't negotiate with gravity. They don't complain that fire is hot. They just learn how reality works, and they move accordingly. The same is true here. Every good life costs something. The only choice you have is whether you pay the cost up front, on purpose, like an adult, or you pay it later, by force, like someone who kept refusing to grow. Most people don't understand this because they've been trained to chase comfort as if comfort is the goal. So they avoid the hard conversation, and then they live inside a hard relationship. They avoid the hard workout, and then they live inside a hard body. They avoid the hard budget, and then they live inside hard financial stress. They avoid the hard discipline, and then they live inside hard regret. They keep refusing the clean pain, and life keeps giving them the messy pain. Clean pain is the discomfort you choose. It's simple, it's direct, it's honest. It's waking up when you don't want to, moving your body when you'd rather scroll, doing the task you keep avoiding, telling the truth you've been hiding, practicing a skill instead of escaping into entertainment. Clean pain feels sharp in the moment, but it leaves no poison behind. It doesn't damage your self-respect. In fact, it builds it. Messy pain is the discomfort you don't choose. It's anxiety at midnight because you've been procrastinating for months. It's resentment because you tolerated disrespect too long. It's humiliation because you kept talking about goals you never executed. It's the slow sadness of realizing you've been promising yourself change for years and nothing is different. Messy pain doesn't arrive in one dramatic scene. It arrives quietly, like rust. It eats time, it eats confidence, it eats possibility. This is why the title matters. No one is coming to save you from the price. Nobody is going to pay it for you. Nobody is going to carry your consequence. Nobody is going to absorb the cost of your avoidance. You can hand people stories, you can hand them reasons, you can hand them explanations. None of that removes the bill. The bill always comes to you. So the question becomes almost insulting in its simplicity. Which pain do you want? Do you want the pain of discipline or the pain of regret? Do you want the pain of training or the pain of staying weak? Do you want the pain of honesty or the pain of living a lie? Do you want the pain of focus or the pain of distraction turning into emptiness? People hear that and they think the goal is to suffer. No, the goal is to suffer intelligently. The goal is to stop wasting pain, because you're already in pain one way or another. The difference is whether your pain is building you or breaking you. And this is where you need to stop thinking in emotions and start thinking in math. Avoidance has interest. It compounds. Every week you delay, the fear grows. Every month you delay, the habit strengthens. Every year you delay, the identity becomes fixed. That's why change feels harder the longer you wait. Not because you're doomed, but because you've been paying the wrong price for too long. A mature person makes a violent mental decision here. I will choose my pain. Not every pain, not a life of misery, just the specific discomfort that buys freedom. Because that's the truth nobody tells you. Freedom isn't free. Freedom is purchased. It's purchased with early mornings. It's purchased with boundaries. It's purchased with saying no. It's purchased with repetition. It's purchased with being the kind of person who can tolerate discomfort without turning it into drama. And here's the part that hits emotionally if you're honest. A lot of people want to be saved from discomfort, but what they really want is to be saved from becoming accountable. Because once you choose the clean pain, you can't keep your old story. You can't keep saying, I'm trying. You can't keep saying, I would. But you become someone who does, and the ego hates that at first, because the ego prefers excuses over evidence. So this chapter is your line in the sand. You stop pretending you can get a great life with no cost. You stop pretending motivation is required. You stop pretending the future will be kinder than the present. You accept the bill. And then you choose the payment plan that leads to freedom. And now we move to the next chapter, because at this point a listener might feel fired up. And that's good, but fire alone doesn't save you. Fire fades. What saves you is structure. What saves you is building a system so that even on your worst day, you still move. That's the next truth. Stop seeking witnesses. Stop seeking rescue. Build a self-rescue system. A system is what rescues you when your emotions won't. Because motivation is a liar. It shows up when it's convenient, then disappears the moment your day gets heavy. And if you're still living like you need to feel it before you move, you'll keep repeating the same cycle. Big promises, strong speeches, a new start, then silence, then shame, then another restart. A mature person ends that cycle by building structure that works, even when the mind is noisy. This is where the rescue fantasy hides again, just in a new form. Some people stop waiting for a person to save them and start waiting for a mood to save them. They keep thinking, if I can just find the right routine, the right book, the right plan, the right advice, then I'll finally become consistent. But consistency is not found, it's built. And the way you build it is brutally unglamorous. You design your days so your future doesn't depend on your current feelings. Let me say it simply. A system is a set of rules you follow even when you don't want to. And the best systems are almost insulting in how basic they are. Not because they're weak, because they're enforceable. Most people fail because they build fantasy systems that require superhero energy. They design a perfect schedule they can only follow on their best day. Then they miss one day and the whole thing collapses, and they call themselves undisciplined. They're not undisciplined. They're just unrealistic. A self-rescue system does the opposite. It assumes you will have bad days. It assumes you will feel tired. It assumes your mind will negotiate. It assumes life will interrupt you, and it builds around that truth. Here's what that looks like in real life. You choose non-negotiables that are small enough to survive chaos, not 10 habits, 1 or 2 anchors. Something that, if you do it, your identity stays intact. Your self-respect stays intact. Your trajectory stays intact. Because the real goal isn't to be perfect. The real goal is to never fully collapse back into the old version of you. This is where people misunderstand discipline again. They think discipline means maximum output. No, discipline means minimum standards that never break. It means you don't let your worst day become a 0 day, because zeros are dangerous. Zeros don't just pause progress. They train quitting. Now here's the part that hits the title directly. When no one is coming to save you, you need a system that saves you from your own weakness, a system that saves you from your own excuses, a system that catches you when your mind starts begging for comfort. And the system needs 3 things, always. First, triggers. You attach habits to moments that already happen. You don't rely on memory. You don't rely on inspiration. You use reality as the cue. When I wake up, I do this. When I finish work, I do this. When I feel stress, I do this. That's maturity, turning chaos into a pattern you can repeat. Second, friction. You remove the easy path to self-sabotage. You make the bad habit inconvenient. You don't pretend you'll resist forever. You design your environment so resistance becomes unnecessary. You stop treating self-control like a personality trait and start treating it like engineering. Third, a reset rule, because you will mess up. And the difference between a child and an adult isn't that the adult never fails. It's that the adult knows how to restart without drama. They don't spiral into shame. They don't punish themselves for being human. They reset fast. They return to the standard. They don't turn one mistake into a new identity. And this is where the psychological maturity becomes visible. The mature person doesn't romanticize their plan. They protect it. They don't announce it. They don't seek witnesses. They don't keep looking for reassurance that it will work. They quietly execute the system until the result speaks for itself. Because seeking witnesses is another form of rescue. It's you trying to borrow belief from other people. It's you wanting someone to clap so you can keep going. And the problem with that is obvious. If the applause stops, you stop. If the attention drops, you drop. That's not growth. That's performance. So a self-rescue system is private. It's boring. It's repetitive. And it changes your life because it removes the need for drama. It removes the need for a big moment. It turns your progress into something almost inevitable because it no longer depends on your moods. Now we reach the final chapter, and it's the paradox that makes all of this worth it. Because when you accept no one is coming, when you stop begging for rescue, when you build your own system, something strange happens. You don't feel abandoned anymore. You feel free. And that's where we end this episode, the freedom of no rescue. When you finally accept that no one is coming to save you, something in you goes quiet. Not the quiet of sadness, the quiet of clarity. The quiet that comes when you stop arguing with reality and you stop begging life to be different before you begin. It's a strange kind of peace because it doesn't come from comfort, it comes from truth. Most people fear this truth because they think it will make them lonely. They imagine it like a cold room, like abandonment, like being left behind. But that fear is built on the same fantasy we've been killing all episode. The fantasy that your stability is supposed to come from outside of you. Once you drop that fantasy, solitude stops feeling like punishment. It starts feeling like freedom, because you're no longer waiting. You're no longer looking over your shoulder. You're no longer hoping someone will finally notice you and hand you the life you want. You're building it. And that is the most adult sentence a human being can say, I'm building it. Because waiting is a kind of slavery. It chains you to people, to timing, to moods, to circumstances, to the past, to the story of what should have happened. Waiting makes you powerless because it gives your future to something you cannot control. But ownership, real ownership, brings your future back into your hands. Even if your hands are shaking, even if you're scared, even if you're tired, at least they're your hands. This is why the title isn't meant to be depressing, it's meant to be liberating. No one is coming to save you is only dark when you still want to be a child. It becomes light the moment you decide to grow up, because it removes the most exhausting job on earth, trying to be rescued. Think about how much energy people waste trying to be saved. They try to be understood. They try to be validated. They try to be seen. They try to win sympathy. They try to convince others that their pain is real. They try to earn permission to take themselves seriously. And all of that is emotional labor with no payoff. It doesn't build the body. It doesn't build the bank account. It doesn't build the discipline. It doesn't build the self-respect. It just builds a better story about why you haven't started. And the moment you stop doing that, you feel the freedom. Not a loud freedom, a clean freedom. The freedom of not needing anyone to agree with you before you act. The freedom of not needing motivation to start. The freedom of not needing the past to make sense before you move. The freedom of not needing a perfect plan before you take the next step. Because that's what maturity really is. It's not a personality, it's not a vibe, it's a relationship with reality. It's the choice to live in the world as it is, not as you wish it would be, and to build anyway. Now, I want to give you a final image that locks the message in your nervous system. Imagine you've been standing on a battlefield, looking at the horizon, waiting for the cavalry. You keep telling yourself they're late. You keep checking the distance. You keep listening for the sound of hooves. You keep surviving, but you're not moving. And then the truth hits you. There is no cavalry. Not because you're cursed, not because you're unworthy, but because this is your fight. And in that moment, you have two options. You can collapse into despair, or you can do the only mature thing left. You become the cavalry. You stop waiting for rescue and you become the rescuer. You stop asking for strength and you train strength. You stop asking for confidence and you build evidence. You stop asking for peace and you set standards. You stop asking for a new life and you start acting like someone who deserves one. Not because the universe owes you, but because you're finally doing the work. So here's the final line I want you to carry with you after this episode ends. Not as a quote, as a standard. No one is coming, and that is the best news of your life, because it means your future is no longer in someone else's hands. It's in yours. No one is coming, not to explain your life to you, not to heal you for you, not to build your discipline, protect your mind, fix your finances, repair your confidence, or undo the years you lost to waiting. And if that sentence still feels heavy, it's only because a part of you is still hoping reality will bend and become gentle. But reality doesn't bend. It responds. It responds to action, to standards, to repetition, to the quiet decisions you make when nobody is watching. So let this be the end of the waiting room. Let it end tonight. Not with a dramatic transformation, with one clean move you can't talk yourself out of, one thing you've been avoiding, one promise you've been postponing, one habit that proves you're done negotiating. Because the only way this message becomes real is if you stop using it as inspiration and start using it as a command. You don't need a savior. You need self-respect. You need a system. You need the ability to move while your mind complains. And you already know what the next right step is. You've known for a long time. The only difference now is you're not pretending someone else is coming to do it for you. Nobody is coming. Good. Stand up anyway.